Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My brothers and my sisters in Islam, Ramadan Kareem to every single one of you, to the elders, to the young people, to everyone of every age here in New York, across the nation and across the world, watching us today on ITV, where you get your Islamic programming. Alhamdulillah for this opportunity to be here. Of course, I want to wish every single one of you a Ramadan Kareem. And I want to introduce myself. I am Afaf Nasher, your sister here in New York City. I am the executive director for a Muslim-led civil rights organization called CARE New York, the Council on American Islamic Relations of New York. And we are a chapter who fights for Muslims here locally in New York State, but also we're part of a family of CARE chapters who fights for the ability to live Islam and to defend Muslims who face discrimination across the United States. We know that discrimination happens all over the place. And oftentimes it really, really comes hard at immigrants. And that's what I want to talk about today. What I'd like to speak about is the immigrant experience and the things that I myself have seen, have witnessed, and have lived through in terms of what it means to be a Muslim immigrant coming to this nation of immigrants. We know all across the world, people fight for ways to try to come into the United States of America. Why? Because there are freedoms and opportunities that people are seeking for themselves and their loved ones. But people also sometimes have this weird idea or notion that when they come to this land of opportunity, everything is going to be so smooth and easy. And of course, that's not the reality. But more than anything else, I think immigrants face many unique issues that we at CARE New York try to champion. Let's go through some of these examples. Well, let's go through what I experienced in my life. I'm a first-generation American for the most part, meaning I grew up in the United States. I came here as an infant, but my parents are from abroad. I'm actually originally from Yemen, and my parents were the first one to come, and my father has a very, very similar immigrant backstory that so many of you actually have, and that is he came with nothing, and he tried to establish himself, and then eventually he brought my mother and my two older brothers and myself here to join him. And the family expanded, and we went through so many of the trials and challenges that first-generation immigrants often face. One of those challenges, my brothers and sisters, were communication issues, first and foremost. If you don't know the language well, of course it's going to be a barrier. And that is why language access is something that is so critical and important, something that we make really a priority for us in the work that we do with CARE New York. So if you're a parent and you want to go to the doctor, but the doctor doesn't speak your language and you have a sick child, what rights do you have to language access? What if you get into legal trouble? What rights do you have to go into the court and assert your ability to access language translations? Remember, you do have rights, but if you don't understand what those rights are, then how could you possibly assert them or use them? If you don't even know they exist, my brothers and my sisters, how could you utilize them? As a matter of fact, not only are you not gaining the benefits of knowing that such language access and translations may be viable to you, but you're actually at a huge detriment. You're actually being impacted negatively when as an immigrant, you don't know what your rights are and what resources you have. Language access is one barrier that comes into play time and time again, and we see the impact of that in so many different ways. But let's also think about culture shock. Culture shock is certainly something that my parents experienced. There they were in a country in which everyone is a Muslim. It was a given that you were Muslim. The values were there, the way that people dressed, the way that they spoke, the adhan coming on 5 times a day from every corner, from every masjid, was certainly not something that was present here. And they really went into a shocking stage where they kind of saw how, for example, youth were raised here, the kind of values that were being espoused, the kind of issues that they saw were really kind of shocking and jarring to them and made them afraid. It made them afraid for our upbringing, myself and my siblings, and it made them very, very protective. I remember very often my parents, alhamdulillah, telling us, "You're Muslim. Our values are Islamic values," and they tried to impart some of that wisdom. At the same time, as an immigrant, they didn't know what resources were available for us to assert so that they could help us be raised into strong Muslims. As a matter of fact, even in that time, my brothers and sisters, there weren't even that many masajid. My father would have to travel over an hour to get to the nearest masjid when he wanted to go pray. Eid Salah was something that was probably the only time that I saw a masjid growing up, because we did not have the local masajid that we do now. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen for this very generous blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have really led the Muslims here to become a stronger and bigger and thriving community where that's no longer the case. But for all the first generation immigrants out there, we want to let you know, we hear you. We understand that there are so many issues, from language barrier issues to culture shock to trying to retain your family unit and trying to allow your children to have strong Islamic identities. We also applaud our immigrants, mashallah, who they come and persevere, and they do so within the limits of the law, but thrive, mashallah. We've seen, like I said, an explosion of masajid construction. We've seen organizations like CARE New York and also sister organizations like MASS New York, Muslim American Society of New York, and so many others who have built centers and who help in the tarbiyah of Muslims all around the world and focus on youth, so that if there is an issue between first generation immigrants who are in culture shock and the younger generation who's growing up here, that there is a bridge between them, alhamdulillah. Let's all subhanahu wa ta'ala remember our immigrant brothers and sisters. Remember, we have a duty to one another. Let's help one another through communication. And call us if you ever think that you are in need of resources as an immigrant, so we can explore with you what rights you have to access things that every other American has. We hope, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that immigrants continue to flood the United States, because we are a proud nation of immigrants. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to stand in our Islamic identity as Americans, inshallah, without ever losing our history of where we came from as well. Jazakum Allah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.